I'm Zach. I play guitar in Rise Against.
I'm Joe. I play bass in Rise Against.
So I'll just hold you like a hand grenade. You touch me like a razor blade.
Man, I believe for me it was "Smoke on the Water" by Deep Purple to impress my dad, and I don't think I played it right. Also, maybe "Breaking the Chains" by Dokken because it was easy.
Actually, the first song I learned was "Personal Jesus" by Depeche Mode on bass because it's 2 notes. I figured I could get my head wrapped around that.
That's a good one.
Yeah, and then it was Ramones' Blitzkrieg Bop.
That's a good one.
For me, it was the band the Bad Brains. They were my first punk rock show I ever saw, and they were so inspiring. Nobody played like they did when they were in their heyday. Just the energy and the passion and the sincerity, that always stuck in my head. And so whatever band I did after seeing that, after picking up an instrument and learning how to play 4 notes or 4 chords, I always wanted to convey what they conveyed on stage.
For me, it was kind of all of the punk bands, the sort of 80s era punk bands I realized I could play that. So many other things like metal and things like that I was getting into at the same time. I wasn't fortunate enough, neither one of us were fortunate enough to be born on either coast of America. If you were from the East Coast, you got into a certain type of music. If you got in the West Coast, we were from the Midwest. So if I'm in Texas, he's in Chicago. You just kind of got into everything that came at you. And for me, I couldn't play, so metal and stuff like that was so far beyond, but the punk records I was hearing, I could do that, so it was really all of, the Ramones and Black Flag and all the things I could get my head around were the ones that were telling me, like, you can do this, you can conceptualize this, you can play this, Minor Threat, things like that, and Bad Brains as well, so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess as I mentioned before, the Bad Brains, no one's ever topped that show. The singer could do a backflip, which is you do a backflip.
I mean,
I'm just kidding.
I can't.
No, it was just great. I don't know. What about you?
Oh man, so many. I mean, I was fortunate enough I had a big mouth, and I'm from a town around Dallas, Texas. So my brother and I were able to go to shows and get in because people knew me. I was 16, 15 years old. But I think our producer, Bill Stevenson, he's Descendants and All and Black Flag. He's just a legend. And his band All, this was after he had done the Descendants, which they're doing Descendants now to great effect. But he had a band called All that had done a punk, they just played a small little punk show, and it was packed. And they opened with some Descendants songs, and I was 16. And it just absolutely blew my mind. I found myself I was perched on top of the PA main the whole show just watching him. And I was the first night I met him, and that was 26 years ago. That was 91. So I've had this thing with him ever since. So I think that was sort of like one of my sort of ground zeros of everything that I'm doing with my life now. So yeah.
That's a tough one. I'm drawing a blank because there are bands that. There are bands that are our age that are still making great music, like Refused and Bad Religion, but they're not new bands or younger bands. I'm trying to think. You got anything? Nothing as of late, I guess.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, like younger bands, like the band that's on this tour, Pairs, younger band making great, relevant punk rock music. But as far as it's a weird state nowadays, bands with guitars like us that it's few and far between. They're not, kids aren't picking up guitars. Hopefully this trend will, usually the trends are cyclical, but guitar sales are down, and people are just buying keyboards and laptops and making music that way, which is great. That's how they're expressing themselves. But as far as younger, newer bands coming out, yeah, I haven't.
I got 2 bands.
What do you got?
There's a band called Culture Abuse
right.
on Epitaph Records. They're really great. They're kind of like mid-tempo, I don't know, post-punk kind of stuff, maybe new wave kind of stuff, but they do it right. It's kind of gritty, not very polished, And I always think that's, for me, I always appreciate that more than something that's very slick sounding. And then I forgot what the other one was that I was going to say.
I mean, I guess on that end of things, like, there's Diese puts out like 100 records a year, and they're all amazing and great, and he's like not even 30 yet, which is amazing. There's also Plague Vendor, another Epitaph band, putting out some great stuff. Now that you've asked, now it's kind of like, oh, wait, what do we got? I personally like the new Queens of the Stone Age record, even though they're older than us or maybe our age. So there's bands putting out relevant good stuff. It's just we tend to sort of listen to the same stuff we've listened to forever, you know. Were you listening to Reagan Youth like 10 minutes ago? Was that Reagan Youth? Yeah. I mean, you know, it's just how it goes.
Everyone just kind of scatters.
Yeah. Fortunately, the buses over here are pretty big, so you have your own bunk, and you just get into your bunk. But I think back in the days of touring in a van, you know, you had a tape, and like that was, hey, we're listening to this dude, I'm driving. Usually it was the guy that was driving, got to listen to whatever. But nowadays, it's, you know, it's old technology now, so you just listen to whatever the hell you want.
7 Seconds, Young Until I Die.
No shit. That's a good one. Descendants, When I Get Old. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. All right.
You know, I think Germany was just very receptive to what Rise Against did, you know, early on, and it was definitely became our home away from home. Because for our first European tour, we literally did 2.5 weeks in Germany alone. We played every small town. We were on tour with a bigger hardcore band called Sick of It All. And just from that moment on, like, Germany was very receptive and very, very good to us. And we never forgot that. So we always made it a point to play a lot of shows in Germany. And our fans here are very, you know, dedicated.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's definitely, those shows are larger in this country for us than pretty much anywhere right now, which says a whole lot. I've noticed German fans tend to be fans for life. You know, the kid that's in the front row now, he's going to be the old man in the front row when he's got white hair. You know, it just seems to be the case, which is amazing. German fans get into bands for life, no matter what trend is happening or what's popular at the time or whatever. It's like if they liked a band when they were 19, they're going to like them when they're 50 or whatever. So, yeah. First car I drove, it was a shitty old station wagon that my parents had given my brother and I, that my dad had like primered the sides of. It was disgusting.
My first car was a 1973 Chevy Chevelle, and this older lady lived upstairs from my grandfather. She had polio, and she couldn't drive anymore, so she sold me her car for $1. And it was in 1973, and it had 30,000 miles on it. Like, she didn't drive it, but it was all rusted. There was a hole in the floor. It was pretty, $1. It's pretty awesome.
3? I mean, I grew up with a big brother that beat the shit out of me all the time. Yeah. But as far as fight, in high school, I was in Sherman, Texas, so I was an outcast kid, so I got in fights all the time. So probably kindergarten. Yeah.
Fighting for me, I think it was, my first real fight was probably in high school at a venue, and this sounds so like stereotypical punk. We were fighting Nazi skinheads. It like literally, they showed up at the show and we're like, fuck you, you don't have a place here. And we fought them, and then they ended up getting thrown out.
That's good.
I wasn't a very good fighter. First CD I bought was, you know what? The first CD I bought was the Ramones' Mondo Bizarro.
No shit.
Yeah, I mean the first cassette. Were you talking CD?
You mean CDers? Oh, okay.
Oh, first record? First record I bought was AC/DC Highway to Hell.
Good one.
Yeah, and then Ramones Subterranean Jungle.
That's such a good one. My father was a radio DJ, so he was always bringing records home. But the actual, so we had a bunch that my brother and I loved, but I think the first one we bought with our own money might have been, it's a toss-up. It's either Motley Crue, Shout at the Devil, or Metallica, Master of Puppets. Because it was 86, 87. So I remember those all came out kind of at the same time. But then it was a windfall of our own music. You know, we just broke away from our dad's stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, my first job was working at a liquor store in my hometown as a stock boy, and I was 13 years old. And it was probably pretty illegal working in a liquor store at 13, but that was it. I stuffed like the newspapers, the Sunday newspaper, stock boy, cashier. So, yeah. And it kind of sucked though because it was Saturday and Sunday at 7 a.m. So I could never sleep in when I was growing up.
It's the worst. I'm kind of drawing a blank on that one. I worked so many terrible jobs when I moved away from home. I was a kid. My brother and I moved to Dallas to start our band, and we worked so many things together because we were terrible at everything, so we'd quickly get fired. We did put together a board game. This is such a weird thing, but it was a diving company, like scuba diving, and they had a Monopoly game called Divopoly, and they had us putting it together with I know that sounds insane, but the only reason we knew the guy was because the rehearsal facility that we used, the rehearsal space, this guy's warehouse was in the back, so he just saw these idiots that like needed a job, and he put us. And he every week he would get complaints from customers saying that there was pieces missing from the games, and we just didn't care. So we were like, whatever. So we got fired. That might be the first time I actually like earned a paycheck, but not for very long.
The first song we wrote together, actually, the first song we wrote together was "Ever Changing," the song on The Unraveling. Yeah, because before the band started, we had a demo. I had a demo of 7 songs already written with a different drummer and everything. But when Brandon first tried out, we wrote "Ever Changing."